right. And then what I'm going to do is I want to talk about what the heck is IPM?
You
And,
just talk away. I figure this one, you just shoot questions and I'll answer
yep. I figured you got it. So we're going to do that.
because
All
I
right.
like this IPM stuff.
Yeah, no. I want to get deep into this. All right, folks. I've got Janet Hurley, who works for in Texas with the Extension Service. She's going to explain what she does, and we're going to tackle the question of what the heck is IPM. Janet, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you, Franklin, for having me this morning. I'm so excited to be here. And yes, for those that are not familiar with who I am, my name is Janet Hurley, and I'm with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. I'm an extension program specialist, and my program specialty area is helping schools with their IPM programs.
Got it. So this is going to be because I've been having some intense conversations. And when I mean intense, yes, there was some shouting and about what IPM is and what it isn't. And I'm getting challenged that what I am doing is not IPM. And because I do not follow the IPM pyramid the way it is in some cases, and there's some people who work in other states where IPM in public schools is law, where in Florida it's not. It's guided, but it's not a law that is hard in the
Well,
books that you have to follow it a certain way.
and I'm very familiar with Florida versus Texas. Texas, yes, we have a law.
Okay.
And yes, I mean, because we've got the longest standing law, as a matter of fact. So, yes, but IPM, people get hung up somewhat on the pyramid, but also just hung up on what is it. And a lot of it is a lot of folks focus too much on the pest management and don't understand the integrated part of it.
Right. And so what I've been, and here is the way I've looked at it. When from an urban residential perspective, when we get called in, 99 out of 100 there is an active infestation. We can't start at exclusion. We have
Correct.
to start at chemical first
Yep.
because there is an active infestation. And yes, we can implement the monitoring, which we do in case of German roaches. Yes, we're going to have to then figure out how we educate the customer. But that usually, the pyramid is usually turned on its head, and it's chemical first, then we work our way towards how many of these things can we actually implement with a client that is not a school, that doesn't have a mandate, and it's their home, and we have to convince them to see it our way versus how many times are you going to spray a year for this? And what I've done is I've said, if I can get out of the 6 or 7, I can get that customer to 4. I've done IPM because I can't twist their arm and said, you have to do this. This is my home. I'll do whatever the heck I want.
Well, and it is. I mean, so, and here is the rub. There is a population that believes that if it comes in a can and you spray it, it will kill all bugs dead.
Yes.
And therefore, you're working with that premise before you even step on their property.
Yes.
Now, granted, and what I am seeing now is, especially, there is a shift. You will have a client that will say, yes, you need to come here and annihilate everything. You are going to start seeing clients that are going to be a little bit different about what their approach is and what they want.
Right.
All of it is still integrated pest management, because the ultimate result, no matter who the client is educating them on where that pest comes from, why it's there, and thus how do we get rid of it. You mentioned German roaches. Well, German roaches just don't walk in off the street.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a human to human contact, but I find that it's very hard for y'all in the business to be able to give messages to your clients that say, hey, by the way, here is the insect and its biology and everything else, and then accept it.
Right. Especially when we deal in cases of multi-unit housing where we're not managing the entire building. We get called in. We got a lot of condominiums here. Some of these things are $1 million, $2 million, and they've got German roaches because they don't. The association doesn't understand that if a tenant moves in or bought a piece of furniture or something and it got introduced to the building, they're saying we can't have roaches because we have a pest control service, but they're only treating common areas. Owners own individual units, and nobody's monitoring and inspecting, and nobody's getting into this. And how do you explain a customer that has a $1 million condo?
Well,
this whole concept.
and that's where the frustrating part is, because there's someone like me in extension going, we know we need to get that education component out.
Mm-hmm.
But I find myself even butting my own head here in the North Texas area.
Mm-hmm.
I have a grant with Dr. Faith Oy, which I'm sure you are extremely familiar with being in Florida.
Yeah, we just had a lot of conversations in the last month and a half.
And we have this project to where we're trying to educate those, and we use the term homeowner, but I don't mean a homeowner. I mean the person who lives in a residence,
yes,
no matter where you're at,
mm-hmm.
from even if you were living in a tent to living in that $1 million condo and everything else in between.
Right.
You know, if it's a structure and you were trying to live there, you don't want pests. Right. I don't want pests.
Right.
I mean, full disclosure, you know, I have a company that does my house. Part of it is because I get to train them and I can tell them to go crawl up and seal that hole where the rats might get in. But yeah, it's a hard thing, this IPM stuff.
Right. And I think the biggest pushback I'm getting from the industry, not from the client, because we have a unique business, we have a unique selling proposition. Our customers don't want the chemical. My customers in particular, they are very receptive to what we try to do because we've branded ourselves as an eco-friendly company, because we can't sell IPM as a marketable.
There is nothing. I mean, in my 20 years, I can tell you, and doing what I do with this International IPM Symposium group and there is nothing sexy, marketable, or anything that says IPM.
Finally, somebody says it.
It's
mind-blowing.
But I mean, Bobby Corrigan and I will both tell you, you put your head down, put your butt in the air, go search that pest out. You put your little detective hat on and you go out and solve that problem. That's IPM. Call it whatever you want.
Yeah, and there's the purists that say, well, no, I did IPM in schools, and what you're doing is not IPM because you first have to use the sticky traps, and then if you got in your state, which you have Tawny Crazy Ant.
Yep.
If it's still called Tawny Crazy Ant, because that
thing
has had more
Tawny Crazy Ants.
Okay, because this had changed shapes.
With Tawny Crazy Ants, you bet your bottom dollar I know what they're gonna do, and it is a chemical application. Yeah. I have told more than one school district, sometimes you've got to throw the bat first, and then come back.
Right. Yeah, because how are you gonna use IPM where you with glue traps and say, well, I've got to fail 3 times before we can apply a chemical?
No, glue traps are monitoring and they're passive. So for instance, because Texas has had this school IPM rule since 1993,
Mm-hmm.
that, okay, you put into fact, the school districts have got to monitor. All right, well, yeah, most of the time we don't have a problem. Then we had COVID,
Right.
and I had a few districts that when they shut down last year at this time and didn't get back in until about June, well, they had some very odd issues. Well, the odd issues wasn't throwing a glue board at it. The odd issue was they had roaches and bed bugs in laptops. Well, what are you going to do with that? Well, there's a few options, and those options do require some heavy chemical locked up, and nobody does anything. But if you do that over the weekend, problem solved, because I got news for you. 500 devices with little bugs crawling out, IT's not going to be happy. So, I mean, what's worse, the poison or the cure?
Right.
Because sometimes you've got to look at the problem and go, okay, what other steps? Monitoring with glue boards, with trapping. I mean, you've got, insect light traps. I'm thinking yellow jacket traps. There's fly, there's, pantry pest stuff. Monitoring is a big scope of things.
Right.
And that's part of it. But again, the other part is where's the pest proofing and the pest prevention? Because I'm sure with your clients, even in Florida, because it's like here in Texas, as long as the bugs are not in my house, I'm kind of all right with everything.
Yep.
Bugs out in nature. And I had to laugh because I was working in the yard over the weekend, and sure enough, I moved something and stirred up a nest of odorous house ants. But only I would look at that as I'm doing it going, oh, hey.
Right. Yeah,
But
it's
am
not
I
in my
going to
house,
do,
so no big deal. I can deal with that.
I mean, well, I was like, okay, you're not at the house, you're outside, you're in nature, knock yourself out. I'm not going to bother you. There's no need for it because I know they're not going to come in my house.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm having that discussion because we focus on the exterior of that home where and especially in Florida where all the bugs are outside. Once you got a humidity problem solved, silverfish gets pretty much solved. Most of it is going to be ants. We deal with so many ants down here. And we have to perform a barrier treatment on a time basis, or that customer is going to call, complain, and we can say, well, we really can't make a chemical application unless you actually complain in order to comply with IPM. There is no customer on the planet, for the most part, that's really going to accept that.
So that's where
Told you it was going to be a hoot.
you just hit the one thing that really just gets on my one last nerve about the IPM stuff.
Right.
Because it's that definition. So, and I take ownership of this one.
Okay.
Because when we were moving a little history about the Texas pest control rules.
Okay.
We have this huge Department of Ag like everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was all enacted, early in the 1900s. In the 70s, when there was this big push for structural pest control across the nation, our agencies split. We ended up with the Structural Pest Control Board and the Department of Ag. Well, the board is the one that got the school IPM law passed and adopted and managed up until about 2007. And then when they were abolished and put back under the Department of Ag, we had to clean up our school IPM rules. Well, one of the things that I kind of pushed for was defining IPM. So this is the definition that we use in our rules.
Okay.
All structural applicators. Integrated pest management, a pest management strategy that relies on multiple pest control tactics including the judicious use of pesticides, informed by accurate identification and scientific knowledge of pests, reliable monitoring methods to assess pest presence, preventive measures to avoid pest infestations, and thresholds to determine when corrective control measures are needed. That's a lot of words, but that's it in a nutshell.
Right.
Because including the judicious use of pesticides, if you go look up the term judicious, give thought. I'm going to give thought about what it is, but my informed, accurate identification and scientific knowledge of pests. So here's the conundrum. Every extension specialist in the country, any entomologist, I got some ants and they're black. Really now?
Right.
Little black ants. Well, yes, there is a little black ant, but are those pavement ants? Are they something else? Because an entomologist will tell you, even myself, who's an associate certified entomologist, well, we have close to 250 species of nuisance ants in the United States. Not knowing genus and species, or at least its common name, makes it very difficult for the pest management professional to understand, to make that judicious use of pesticides without understanding accurate identification and scientific knowledge of pests. Now, for you who've been in Florida for a few years, you know what your most common ants are.
Right.
And you know what products you're going to use. Now, you can switch them up. I always tell everybody, the other thing that we don't do, and it's hard, and you probably got one of the best ones sitting right in your own backyard by the name of Faith Oy, who really goes on about changing up your chemical composition.
Yep.
Because that's part of it. But that reliable monitoring methods to assess pest presence, yeah, you use your customer. Yeah.
What monitor do you use to monitor a ghost ant pest pressure level in the area? It can't be done.
That's what I was thinking. I'm like, I'm not thinking, glue boards and ants never go together. But you got to know your area, and you've got to know what's conducive conditions.
Right.
So again, understanding that, I mean, IPM is so much more than that pyramid.
Right.
It really is. And it's that multiple control tactics. And yes, I may even have a little perimeter spray around my house. I mean, I don't want fire ants coming in. I don't want the odorous house ants coming in.
Yep. I mean, we know that you've got odorous and we have ghost ant. You've got, and you got the Tapenoma Cecil, and I've got Tapenoma melacephalum. If I do not make it forced me, this little ant brought me to my knees, made me cry, and basically forced me to have to use fipronil, which I never had to use before. Never had to. In 14 years of pest control, we started using it 2.5 years, 3 years ago, because 50% of all our ant calls were this little ant that nobody could get rid of. And we had to go in and use fipronil on every initial because if we used neonicotinoids, we found ourselves making 2 applications versus one.
And then you run into a whole nother thing when you're using the neonics nowadays. So
So now we had to make add more pounds of active ingredient.
Yep.
Versus a one shot where we knocked it down probably 96% on one shot because we used the fipronil, versus having to make 2 applications of a neonic, which adds more chemical than necessary. And so we found ourselves in that predicament saying, here we are, an eco-friendly company. We're trying not to use these products, but we have no choice. And now we figured out that if we get it knocked down, we don't have to use it as often. We don't even have to do a quarterly. We only reapply it if our other lower end products haven't gotten the control. But I have to make a timed application of something, because as a commercial business, I can't afford a 30% callback rate, 40%.
Well, and nobody can. I
Nobody
mean,
can.
and we do that again, like I said, down in the Houston Gulf Coast area. I mean, because if you're not in our state, you're battling an ant. We just don't know which species you've got, because
Yeah.
one of them can be, but even with fire ants, depending on, where you're at and stuff, I tell my schools, if it's going to be an area that's going to be heavily used and you can't go out and do the IGR 3-4 times a year, well, then you might need to use the bagged fipronil,
Yep.
top choice,
Yep.
and put that out, because again,
Yeah.
so one of our things that we have to say when we do our school IPM stuff is talk about practical and economical. And I tell them all the time, I'm like, well, we've really got to work that out.
Yeah.
Because I'm also home to the state of, and ironically, I was leaving your home state from a meeting with Faith. On my way back home, we had done a work group meeting and got a call from a school district where a child had died because they had been exposed to fire ants.
Yeah.
And it was one of those deals where part of it was on the coaches who did not understand what anaphylactic shock is,
Right.
didn't get medical help. But at the same time, it exposed a weakness on how the district was actually putting out their fire ant bait. Rather than doing the 40 acres that was the joint property between two campuses, they were only doing 2 acres surrounding the campus and the athletic field. So, and my comment to everybody was, well, yeah, you treated that, but did you think the fire ants that were out in between those 36 acres, that they knew someplace different?
Right.
No, you know thy beast, know thy pest.
Right.
So the one thing I tell everybody that you were saying, you're worried about the chemistry, you got your labels, you got your safety data sheets, you know how you're applying it,
Right.
but you also put on your service ticket genus and species.
Right.
You put down that specific, because if somebody was going to go and judge you, if they go up and look up stuff, because there's enough out there with credible information on these insect pests that we're having to throw things at them because they're not native.
Right.
They don't have a predator here. So they can outcompete, and they can, and their life cycle is so quick, they can also become resistant.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Who knew being in pest management that you were going to be a detective?
Yeah. No, I mean, when I listened to Bobby Corrigan about, biological assessment and evaluation, I mean, the terms are, I noticed the terms are changing, and the conversation around, and I think we need to have the healthy conversation about this, because there are those who are defending IPM that it can't be changed. And this is the problem that a lot of people are having with IPM, because it is so rigid in certain areas, where now we're going to assessment-based management, where Deanie Miller is talking about that. And that is awesome. It's still not marketable from a pest control perspective, but we're all supposed to be doing assessment-based pest management. All of us. And all of us are supposed to be doing what Bobby says, to looking at being an observational biologist. And these terms, but when you start throwing the term in IPM, then everybody loses it. And that's where everybody's getting hung up on.
That's where I'm the rabble rouser, like in the room.
Right.
Because again, I look at my definition going, reliable monitoring methods to assess pest presence. Okay, I'm pretty sure I just threw everything you just said by everybody else in one little sentence, bullet point. Right. But again, if you know thy pest, rats, roaches, bats, because I get those calls. I'm sure you do too. raccoons, ants, spiders. Every last one of them's got some type of scientific knowledge, and you've got to assess. And that rigidity
Hmm.
that I know what you're talking about drives me crazy.
Right.
And because this is a PG rated show, we're going to just say drives me crazy.
Right.
Because in my 20 years, and you mentioned my buddy Bobby, when I learned IPM, and I learned it from him and Dr. Mike Merchant and my other coworker, Dr. Don Renchi, but it was what we referred to as this head down button air thing.
Right.
I'll never forget, we were at the Indian reservation and you could smell the pine cleaner. I swear to God, we had to been 500 feet away from the door. And Bobby was so cute. He tapped me on the shoulder and he goes, just because it smelled clean doesn't mean it is clean.
Yeah. Yeah. I talk about pest control clean and real clean, and people don't get it.
And then
Yeah.
I proceeded to watch him crawl on floors, turn the place. The place was actually pretty darn clean until we got into the student dormitory. And this was 2002. And I saw bed bugs for the first time.
Wow.
But we were at, and it was sunny and it was arid, and they had those plastic mattresses. Him and Dr. Mark Lame had us haul all these mattresses out and toss it on the ground. And that was part of the IPM solution.
Right.
And then talking to the folks about what they really needed to do and what was pest control back then. And the only thing none of us, I don't think, really grabbed onto was, well, those were bed bugs. And oh, if I had had a crystal ball back then, I should
Right.
have saw that one coming.
Right. Yeah, and this is where we get, and there's the conversation that we're having with the IPM purists, where they refuse to call what they do IPM. They're calling it something else because they say, well, it isn't IPM because of the legal definition of IPM. The legal definition of IPM has to be changed in order for us to call it IPM.
Baloney. Okay, so there is no legal definition. EPA and FIFRA does not have a legal definition.
Good. I'm glad.
Therefore,
I'm glad somebody cleared that up.
therefore, everything that everybody spouts is multiples of definitions. Now, the definition I read to you, that is the Texas Department of Ag's definition for
Right.
structural pest control.
Right.
Yes, we did that because it helped clarify when our inspectors go in to do the school IPM inspection, because they were required by law to do that,
Right.
then they have a basis along with our law that says, and it is its own code in the Department of Ag's structural rules that says that, they're going to have a coordinator, that they're going to monitor, that they're going to educate, that they're going to use preferential use for least toxic chemicals. Well, our least toxic is green, yellow, red. And truthfully, the genesis behind all of that, especially when you think about the law was passed in 1991, when I had long hair and, wore contacts, had a whole different life back in the early 90s. But I think back to what they were doing, and what they were doing when they passed that bill was to change the behavior of pest management professionals, because back then they were exterminators, and they were going in and spraying baseboards.
Right.
I mean, what precipitated us getting the rule was people going out and taking care of head lice with ag chemicals inside buildings. Well, if you cannot stop people from doing something against the rules, then I guess you got to write better rules to circumvent that.
Right.
But is there a federal definition of IPM? No. Now, on the USDA side of the house, under the National Institutes for Food and Agriculture, that area has a definition for the IPM roadmap. Most of that roadmap goes to agricultural, but yes, urban community dabbles into it, because what really want to drive me bonkers is the fact that I've got so many different regulatory agencies that all say, yes, we love IPM, but no two of them can come together and really help unify this.
Right.
Because you and I both know, I mean, I grew up with that kid. Yeah, they sprayed the baseboards, but I still couldn't figure out what for. But if I got cockroaches, and when I was a kid growing up, we moved from apartment to apartment. Well, I got news for you. You know what my mom and I did when I was young? You take over a new apartment. I went down to the store and guess what I bought? Came in a can. You pop the lid, close the doors, walked out, let it go, come back in, open the windows, air it. But guess what? You didn't have anybody else's bugs. And then I got older and got very interested in IPM because I volunteered for something, and then stumbled into this job just because I volunteered at a yard expo on IPM. But once I figured out what IPM was no pest, no pesticide. That's the main premise.
Right.
But you and I both know outdoors, there's a strong probability there's some type of pest.
Right.
It's just not in my indoors.
Right.
As long as you're not coming in and spraying my baseboards, hey, thumbs up.
That's been my premise from because see, I come from L&O, and
Yeah.
to me it was unconscionable in my genesis of being in pest control to mix that many products to kill something for the simple purposes of making something pretty that somebody had planted. I mean, to me, it drove me bonkers from a conscious perspective. We're spraying this entire yard with 2 insecticides, 2 fungicides, herbicides, and all these kids are crawling all over this for no other reason than to say I've got a pretty lawn. And I get it, and I don't believe in the legislation of that, but I said I have to find a better way, and that better way for me was IPM when I started talking to the extension agents and educating me on cultural practice.
Yep.
And then I went to agriculture and I said, well, who are the guys that can't afford to get it wrong? It's the ag guys. Let me see what they're doing in organic agriculture and let me learn from that. And I started when I founded my company to say, why don't we just implement that? It says if you mow it high, you mow it frequent, you control the water, we're the point where we were using 66% less chemical than the average. And then when 25 Bs came in, we were able to integrate that because we could never really be successful with biologicals in a commercial landscape. It just wasn't feasible. It wasn't practical for us. So we figured it out that, hey, people are like, how much chemical uses? Well, we're only using this 1 pound a season for fungicide, and they're using 5 of those bottles a year. We were using 1. So we got into radical pesticide reduction, and I showed people how to use, like having a power rig to spray shrubs to me was useless when you were spraying bifenthrin and 95% of the bifenthrin was landing on the ground, totally missing the shrub.
Yeah.
And so we started learning from agriculture how to make applications to those shrubs where we used, instead of 90 gallons of water, we were using 9 and using 90% less water and getting the application actually on the shrub, not in the ground and not in the air.
And see, that brings up all the other things. And truthfully, that's kind of not quite that story as far as how I got into IPM, but it was, was in a home, had a coworker who loved to do compost. but I didn't think that was enough. And here we have this soil called Blackland Prairie, which is it's just
Hmm.
like clay. Couldn't figure out what was going on with my yard. That's when I started learning about this IPM and learning about aeration. But it doesn't matter if it's an indoor problem or an outdoor problem. It's solving what's at the root of it. So again, what you really are focusing on outdoors in your landscape is, do they got good soil? What kind of moisture do they have? What kind of plants do they have?
Right.
Is there anything that we need to be aware of? Because again, Floridians are no different than Texans in that, yes, there's places we have high humidity, but there's also high wind.
Right.
You know, you guys have got to worry about salt and sea spray. I mean,
Yeah.
there are different things, and well, just because that looks really good on TV, it may not look so good in your yard.
Right.
I'll
The
see
right
stuff
the
and
right plant in the right place is something I battle with landscapers, where they put that plant where the customer wanted, and I said, I don't care how much fertilizer I throw at this, it's never going to look good
nope,
because you don't have the light. It needs light. It doesn't need fertilizer.
no,
And that's the biggest problem I have with education, is that we got to educate the landscaper and we got to educate the homeowner, but the industry doesn't want to get out and educate the homeowner, the industry, because then we have to give away secrets and then we have to do so many things, and we don't want to get into that business, but nobody wants to educate the consumer. And I
well,
believe that that's where my responsibility lies, is to educate the consumer.
and that's where, Dr. Oy and I have both been, back and forth on this, because that's where I would love to get our master volunteers more active and getting them to do outreach. That's where that comes from. As a matter of fact, I'm hoping to launch a program later this year that where we do start. I've got um, what we call these IPM experience houses here,
Mm-hmm.
where we could do educational programming and show homeowners, hey, these are some of the things you just need to be aware of, because especially here in North Texas, I've got people who are buying homes for the first time and they're not understanding what to do, how to do it, what to plant. And I mean, yeah, I've learned. And I tell everybody, yeah, I'll put in the back work, which I did Sunday, but I also plant plants that are going to sustain themselves for the rest of the summer with little to no maintenance.
Right.
Because I don't have time. And once COVID really kicks loose, I'll be back on the road and I won't know if I've come or gone or already been there.
Yeah. No, I love natives. It's just that in Florida, they're so plain. It's so hard because
Yeah.
there's no colors. So I battle with that, but I can show the client options with really low maintenance plants that don't require any pesticide. That don't require, like, we have Schefflera, very rarely
Yeah.
is it going to get anything at all. There's no, if the customer feels like if you didn't spray their plants, you didn't do your job because you were supposed to spray all of them. I said, but why are we spraying those plants and applying a pesticide when it gets nothing? And that's where my education is with my clients, where I sit down and I consult all of my clients, is that we're going to do this, this. This is why you hired us, to not have the chemical on your property, versus having to make a blanket tank mix application running around town with 200 gallons of a pre-mix, because it's just much easier to spray everybody like this than to actually do work that requires a technician to think.
Yeah. And it's reminding the clients, you can always say, we're doing this so that we also protect, the bees, the butterflies, the hummingbirds.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to go throw back something else at them. I tell everybody, sometimes you got to just throw different words back at them that they go, oh,
Right.
you're protecting the bees.
Yeah. And and this is where we have gone through that. We got to give the client what the client wants in their mind. In other words, my clients are looking for natural and organic. And people will say, well, you're just misleading the client because there's no organic. I says, well, we have 5 options that we can give the client. It might not be in their price range. It might not be what they want really, but we have the options. And then if you can mow that lawn weekly versus every 2 weeks, it's going to need much less fertilizer. We've got blackout areas in the state of Florida, as you know, where you can't use nitrogen throughout the year. One of the things that I discovered is as I was doing the services the way I was doing for the landscapes, I could not sell the client on residential pest control service because they didn't have any bugs in the house, ever. We were automatically spraying the lawn around the property. We found that, hey, it didn't dawn on me until like 5 years later after doing this. Why can't I sell them pest control? They wouldn't buy any because he says, when you started doing our lawn, we don't have any more ants in the house. We discovered by serendipity that we didn't have to apply pesticide. I wasn't smart enough to know this then, that if I did not apply a pesticide indoor, they had no bugs. Where people said, no, you have to go inside every single time and apply something because the customer expected. Our customers were saying, we don't need you to spray the inside of the house. So we said, why don't we just create a service that doesn't require the indoor spraying all the time?
Yeah.
Do an exterior only. People are in the industry threw up their arms and says, no, because that's not pest control. I says, and so this is where we're having this debate all the time where, so if I don't spray the inside of the house and they have no bugs, I'm not doing pest control. Let me get that straight. So, and that was the whole.
That's the mind blower. Cause I'm like, but you are, if I'm happy, and everything's being done. And if by chance I do notice something, carpenter ants,
Right.
okay, y'all are willing to, hey, maybe I do need to step inside
Right.
and take a look. But if I can put the bait outdoors, great. If not, but I mean, that is pest control. I'm sorry, because
Yeah, if the bug isn't there, it's under control. And then this is where people are like having a fit all the time where we're providing, let's say we're really fanatical about baits. I mean, we're indoor. It's in our website and it's our policy. A technician cannot spray the inside of the home ever. We have a zero spray policy in Florida. People say you can't control bugs without spray. I said, we've been doing it for 9 years inside, where we use predominantly baits.
mm-hmm.
And if we can get away with borate baits, gel baits, borate baits, we get it done, and we control
I was going to
ants.
say there are two well-known urban entomologists out of Virginia Tech and Rutgers, Dr. Miller and Dr. Tulu Wang, that prove that.
Yeah, and this is we used her protocols, and before I knew her protocols, I was using Brenner's material that he did for controlling roaches. And we developed an entire protocol where we applied it into the inner city HUD. Inner city HUD said they've never been able to control the German roach population in this part of the inner city. And it took us 3 years. And we got it done with nothing more than bait.
And it can
an entire
be
community.
And like I said, I've saw the research that both of them presented years ago, but I've seen it myself. I'm like, the biggest problem, people get stuck in a rut, and I don't care what kind of pest control you're doing, is I go and I use the same chemical over and over and over again.
Expecting a different result.
Yeah.
The definition of insanity. Yeah. And here's where the biggest, what I've done where, and Faith was teaching this, she teaches this a lot, is chemical rotation. The problem is people keep rotating their chemicals with the same active.
Yes.
I mean, with the same group, not understanding that you need to change the entire group, not just the active ingredient. That's not chemical rotation. And so we're having all these discussions, and I'm trying to have these discussions openly and honestly about the real expectation. One of the biggest challenges that I'll have this probably, you can probably speak to this, but I think Deanie Miller would probably have a stronger opinion, is when I challenged HUD on the fact that, is it the pest control company's fault in public housing, in this case government, is it the pest control company's fault that they bid it low, or the fact that you knew it couldn't be done and you accepted that bid anyway when you know you can't treat for $1 a unit? And say, HUD is telling us, yeah, but we don't have the funds and we don't have the money, but all the data is there that you paid for to show that this is how you do inner city roach management, not by hiring a pest control company that does a spray service, yet you still believe that they could do it for $1.50 a unit when it costs $9 a tube to control German roaches. Is it HUD's fault? And then we're throwing it on the pest control industry saying, well, they're not performing the inspections, they're not doing this, they're not doing that. But you know it can't be done with what you're paying. So whose fault is it really that we have this issue?
Because this is where the rubber meets the road, and this
Yeah.
is something that I've really started to this is where I question again those agencies that say we support IPM, we believe in all this,
Right.
but do you think this all happens by magic?
Right.
I mean, a lot of that, in order for, and really to be real honest with you, no, it isn't successful with a company. Now, could that building hire somebody and that's their full-time job, that and fix door sweeps,
Right.
because that would be 3/4 of it,
Right.
you know, but are they still willing to do that? Because you know darn good and well that person, even if they hired them to do that, wouldn't be able to do all that because something else would come up. Oh no,
Yeah.
you need to come over and fix this electrical socket,
Yeah.
or whatever, and then the pest control gets pushed to the side.
Yeah.
This
No,
is-
and not only that, but are they willing to put that person through pest control training so they understand that this is how you inspect a unit, this is how you seal, this is how you do it, and then they'll say, well, we don't have the budget still because this is additional work. And
Yep.
and I deal with this in private with buildings that call me in that are private that said we want to go eco-friendly, and then I start talking to them about the reality of the cost and how we have to do these things. I had one building do it, and they were complaining about American roaches on the first floor, 7-story building. And I said, well, what is that guy doing? Well, he's spraying the inside of the common areas every time. I said, but look at these doors. I can stick my entire hand under these doors. All of a sudden, they invested the manager, the technician, the guy who does the maintenance engineer, said, install these sweeps on all your doors and watch how this problem goes away and you don't have to spray it anymore. And they did that. And now nobody complains about American roaches on the first floor anymore. It's amazing how that happened. And then this is where I, again, where the rubber meets the road, their initial investment to convert to an eco-friendly building, where all we did is take lead practices and said, this is what you need to do, was a $10,000 to $12,000 investment initially, but they were overrun with German roaches in the laundry rooms, in the trash rooms, and in certain corridors because the guy wasn't doing any monitoring. So he was spraying everywhere, yet we didn't know where the problems were. It took us 6 months to fix all this at 10 grand when they were paying $250 a month for the service. And I said, this is the reality. But now we're down to, we get one complaint a month out of 120 units, and it's really minor stuff. It's under control now, but it took about 10,000. And the reason I asked about the HUD is because we had to get a private grant to get it done. And it took us 3 years, but I donated $100,000 of it because $50,000 of the grant wasn't enough to cover this. So I said, hey, it's $150,000 in 3 years to accomplish what you were thinking you were doing with a $1,200 a year contract. There's a big disconnect between the reality and what it really costs on all parts. But putting the blame on the industry for something that you hired them to do at that money, and then not say, hey, it's really our responsibility to do IPM when IPM isn't being practiced because there is no money in the budget to really practice IPM.
Well, and you bring up the thing that when I talk about our school IPM rules, and even though the rules require the district, meaning the superintendent, must appoint an IPM coordinator, I circle back around and it's back in the rules. But the administrators have got to support that IPM program.
Right.
Sometimes that is in financial ways.
Right.
It's not just what are you putting out to solve our pest problem. It's that preventive measures.
Right.
So yeah, door sweeps, or they make those green drains depending on where those are at.
Yeah.
Those all work, but convincing somebody, oh yeah, this is part of your pest control program, they're like, what? No, you just got to spray because that's
Right.
what the TV told me you do.
Right.
Actually, no, we're learning more. It's just we don't have reality TV on what we really do for pest control.
Right. Which I am. We're launching. I'm going to launch 5. I got 2. I've got our Nature Pest one, which we educate our customers on what we do and why we do it this way. We've got the Pest Geek podcast, which I think this episode is like 390 or something. Been doing it for 6 years, but we really do have to launch. You just gave me a brilliant idea as we were talking. Why isn't there some type of cooperative effort with really good SEO? Because it costs money to do it. But why don't we have a YouTube channel, Ask a Master Gardener, where we interview master gardeners from all over the country on their areas and say,
what an idea.
and then we just have them on and we ask them about plants and problems in their specific area. And we include, which I'm fanatical about, the extension service, the cooperative extension service, where because most of the master gardeners I know down here come out of the extension service.
Well, it's extension sponsored, so
Yeah.
that is a federal state supported program, Master Gardener, Master Naturalist, that allows extension a way to teach others so that we can get our material out. And I'm always struggling, and trust me, through COVID, even those volunteers were struggling on what to do. And I love your idea.
I mean,
think
if
that is just genius.
Because I had this we sat down to dinner. I had the conversation with Oi. She says, why isn't IPM popular? She hit me with that question. I says, because it isn't marketable. The problem is all of you've got the information, but all of you have all these handcuffs of what you can say, where you can go, what you can do. You can't go on a YouTube channel like you and I, in most cases, a lot of people in this inside. Even I'm trying to get Dr. Kohler on the podcast. There's certain things they can't be on because of their rules. And the idea is if we can put it in print, but a homeowner isn't going to read a document written by the extension service. They want a solution that says, do this, do this, do this. Just like when I go to YouTube and I said, how do I change the alternator? There's 5 videos on how do I change for my specific model that somebody's gone through it. And we have all this knowledge bottled up under a lampshade in the dark where nobody's looking for it. And this is why I do YouTube. This is why people laugh at me. I do TikTok. I said, I just got 1,000 followers on TikTok talking about bugs. Okay. We have the technology. We have the knowledge. Why aren't we using it?
A lot of it, and I'll speak to what we've been struggling here in Texas. It's that one final component. So it's getting things out, getting it. There's never enough hours in the day to do everything you want to do.
Of course, yeah.
And this is part of it. And yeah, part of it is also educating others that it's okay to think outside of a box.
Yeah.
You know, we've done, garden fairs or whatever. Well, yeah, but y'all are master gardeners. You can do other things.
Right.
But it's again.
I'm thinking of going right now. I'm going to talk to a bunch of nurseries. And we're going to start it's called the Nursery Showcase, where we bring on, I'm looking at a 5-day-a-week podcast. And what we're going to be doing is showcasing one plant from a nursery where we talk about the 10 questions. Where do you plant it? What sun does it need? What pest does it get? What disease? Where can you get it? What USDA climate zone can you plant it in? And we answer all those basic questions on that one plant. The nursery gets a free promotion where people can go get their plants locally if they want that plant. We get to put out important content so that the customer doesn't put that plant in the wrong place, doesn't select a plant they can't maintain.
Yeah.
And it's a 5-minute podcast, literally. These are 5-minute conversations about all of this, and you showing the plant, and this is how you do it, and this is how you care for it, and this is, if you're going to put it in a pot, you're going to have to put it in 6 months in this pot and then there. And we have these 10-minute conversations about something they know, which is their plant.
Well, yeah,
and we could do something like this with the extension service, which I'm trying to get my extension agents to get on. I'm having enough trouble getting them on Facebook just to post a 2-minute thing about something they wrote and say, look, guys, if you put it on Facebook and you put the link, people will read it. I don't have time. I said, how many times a day do you go to the bathroom? You can sit on the commode and do this. Literally. I mean, the excuses of why things can't, you're sitting, yeah. I do it. I'm posting stuff while I'm using time management, and getting the information out, because I think there is so much information, the stuff Faith Oy writes, I basically take it and I verbalize it to where it's communicable. I think that's the right word, to people. I came up with my own words.
That's okay. So do I.
Yeah, I used to have a boss that was from Texas, and he used to come up with his own words too, and I thought it was hysterical. But how do we get the industry to work together with academia, with extension, which I'm a fan about, which nobody wants to do, by the way, most people. And I applaud Philip Kohler, because he's done that with the conferences he's put out, and the magazine he bought, and the university got involved, and he made, I think, the right steps in the right direction. I think we just need to take it further. I'm just one of those guys that says, hey, look, I might not agree with you 100%, but can we value the differences and have these conversations where we can educate people on this?
Well, I think you just hit on the nail on the head, because the hardest part conversation we're having in this country is to understand you can agree to disagree.
Yeah.
And it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And yes, we do need to work in more partnerships. And I really wish that the industry, I can tell you right now in Texas, I wish they would reach out more.
Right.
And say, hey, we're here to help. How can we help?
Right.
Because, we can reach out all the time, but I don't know what you're doing and how you're doing it, but everybody knows where I hang out.
Right. Right.
I'm not that hard to track down.
No, right. Yeah, exactly. I think creating the content at scale is an overwhelming, mind-numbing task of how we're going to accomplish this. But when you've done several hundred of these, you kind of figure some things out that help people. And it's not that hard. Like, where are you going to come up with the content? The content is in your head. You know this.
Well, yeah, because we're just, believe it or not, full disclosure, my teammates and I are coming up with a podcast. And part of it has to do with the fact of what we do get in common: insect ID questions. Yeah. We're going to just cover what we normally get here. Our first podcast is going to be on fire ants.
Yeah. And do it on video. Don't do it just on audio, because there's so many people that aren't looking for audio. Nobody is looking for a podcast on, let me sit here and let me listen to information about bugs just for the heck of it. They need a practical solution in order for them to find you. I was just pointing that out to California. They have an IPM website that has 250 subscribers, and this is in California, where people are supposed to be environmentally crazy about this, and you've got 250 subscribers to a channel. I'm saying, like, I get 250 watches the moment I put it out. And this video now has been on for 2 years, I think, 3 years, 250 views on it, to where they don't get that you can't legislate this information. It can't be about compliance. It has to be about what interests the homeowner. And that is, I don't want any bugs in my home. And it has to be practical. How do I do it?
Yeah.
And so we got to give the secrets away, which is what everybody's upset with me about for the last 6 years. They're eating their liver. And what I'm doing is I'm getting pesky bottles of ketchup to hand out so that they can put it on their liver and eat it, because there's nothing I can do to help unless I give it away for free.
Well, I mean, because the truth be told, the one sitting on the data is the one you've had dinner with. Truth be told, only a small percentage of the American population purchases pest control.
Right.
It is a very small percentage.
Yeah. And this is
Therefore,
why
the
companies
rest of
sell
them
direct to
are
consumer.
winging it themselves.
Yeah.
And I would much rather have them have the right information than them going down to some big box store and listening to some sales guy or whatever make a decision because they don't understand.
Yep. And my answer to that is, if you have the knowledge and you have the expertise, why aren't you putting it out? And that's where I'm goading.
No,
the,
and
the,
we
the
trust
industry.
me, we struggle because we put it out there. And again, it's this isn't the hot, sexy topic, so we can't even get people to pick it up.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you something. If you go to my Nature Pest channel, I've got 200 videos. We're getting ready to produce 5 a day. And we've got over 5,000 subscribers. We have more subscribers than any pest control company in America right now, because we make it sexy. But we have to give practical advice on how they actually solve it, where I put out my entire protocol on roach control, which is what Deanie Miller does. By the way, if you look at that, you'll laugh and say, this is what Deanie Miller wrote. And I put it out on a 20-minute video where I take them step by step how to solve a roach problem in an apartment. It's got almost 200,000 views.
But again, that's what people need, because you
Yeah.
don't want them going down there and just spraying.
Yeah. And my goal is, how do we partner? Because I have to read the information. I mean, I can read, that's one of the advantages of public school, I guess, that I don't need a PhD to read a PhD dissertation on a certain study and then translate that to something that's applicable to a homeowner, where we took out 99.9% of it and distilled it to something they can consume. And that's the challenge, that it needs to be consumable. But you got to be on TikTok. You got to be on Facebook. You got to be on YouTube. It can't be, I have our own blog on our own page.
Nobody's
going to go to it.
Well, obviously you found me through Facebook, but
Yep.
I'm not everywhere. I've not signed up for TikTok, but I'm like, we might get there. The house might get there. The IPM house might get there. Janet might not, but no, that's where I've said all along is it's got to be in short blibbits of what they understand. It's the who, what, when, where, how, and why.
Yep. And practical. Listen, if you're going to apply the problem is nobody wants to tell people to apply a pesticide. And that's where the homeowner is going to say, but you told me what was wrong with my car. You just never told me how to fix it. If you don't tell me how to fix it, it's totally useless. And
we have to. And I mean, and that's something I truly do believe in, not just myself, but the people I work with here in Texas Extension, is because, and it has a lot to do with the fact of, because we do have stringent licensing.
Yep.
We want to make sure, I mean, I don't care who you are. There's a pesticide, it's got a label. You should be able to understand that label.
Yep.
And, I was telling somebody, I said, you read the label when you buy food.
Right.
Why don't you read the label when you buy anything else?
Right. It's because people, I was reading a study out of California. They did back, I think it was in 98. It's a pretty old study already. And where they asked homeowners why they waited so long to hire a pest control company.
I know the study.
And basically they said, well, because the stuff that pest control people use are so much more toxic than the over-the-counter stuff. And I'm looking at this and I'm going, well, deltamethrin at 6% and deltamethrin at 6%, it's exactly the same thing. But they think, and here's what the industry did it to itself.
Yep.
Because they said what we have is so much stronger, you can't get it. And now that is the unintended consequence of now complaining that Do My Own and places like that are selling it direct to consumer without a license. And I said, well, it's a general use pesticide. They never needed a license. And it was never that toxic as you claimed it was. And yes, now they can get it. And unintended consequences of that is customers, Orkin has said for the last 50 years, it never goes above 20% nationally. People are misapplying pesticides because we refused to tell them the truth and give away all our secrets. And now we're in the age of transparency, and you have a bunch of people that are just self-protective. And that's where we're at. And I think that's where we need to start. The change needs to start.
Well, I've always, and it's funny because many of my arguments are, well, if they do it, we're going to lose business. Or if we do this, we're going to, and I'm like, I'm sorry, as long as there's pests in the world, there will always be work for us because seasons change, dynamics change, certain things happen.
Yeah.
Heavens to Betsy, insects are one of our bigger indicators on other things that could be going on, especially inside a structure. But it also, the random, well, we've got this smell. I know it's something dead. Well, where's the flies? We don't have flies. All right. You can't have dead without
flies.
They do go together. But if you're still having a strong odor, smells like death, and it's an exterior, I said, either look for a leak or watch for a different type of fly. So
right.
Yes, sosids or something else can come because, again, if it's a fungal and a bacteria growing, yes, they can grow from that.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, I just had this discussion with one of my techs at a job where when we do drain fly work, we always put a lamp. We're one of the few companies that put a lamp. And we say we install a lamp in the bathroom. We got a plug-in lamp. And the tech said, well, I didn't put it because the customer said they didn't have a fly. They have never seen any flies. And I said, well, Biology 101 says if there's a child, there's a parent somewhere. And sure enough, there was a problem with water behind the wall, and we found it, and we sucked it out. And I sat there for an hour with a vacuum cleaner and a hair dryer, getting the water out, which no chemical. He says he already had foamed it. That foam was not going to go into that wall because it was waterlogged. And I said he installed the lamp. Come back a week later, we're seeing flies now, and that's no flies on the lamp. This is funny. I mean, this is the funny stuff we have to deal with. For 2 weeks, 3 weeks, he didn't install the lamp because the customer said he never found it, but we kept finding larvae. He installs the lamp. I go in and there's no flies on the lamp. I said, something's wrong. I look in there, and the paper backing wasn't removed from the glue board. Okay? So I tell him, and he was flustered already with this situation because he's already been there 4 times. And the customer was very patient. But I said, why did you listen to the customer to begin with? We don't listen to the customer. We're the experts.
They are paying you.
You should have installed that lamp, and at least we would have gotten the adults down and stopped the breeding. I showed him because he's a 1-year tech. I said, this isn't in any manual where you have to suck water out of a wall with a vacuum cleaner and out of a tile and then clean this out, carve it, and caulk it. This isn't in any manual. It's not in Malice. It's not in Purdue Pest Management. It's not in any IFAS site. You're not going to find it. So I stood there and we finally, guess what? I take the backing out. I'm doing the cleaning and I'm doing all that. And the customer comes and looks, hey, there's a fly on the board. It wasn't 5 minutes later that it started catching flies. And After that, we left it there for another week. We came back and we looked again, and there was a little bit of larvae. Caulk had separated, dried it out again, resealed it. No chemical was needed to solve that problem, except, well, the caulking, which is a chemical. I know I'm going to get
probably eat it anyway. So,
yeah. And so that was, these are the things, but we have technicians in the field that aren't trained. And this is one of those where I could have told him all about larvae and he still wouldn't have hit because he was still used to doing some type of chemical application instead of just saying, let me get a vacuum cleaner. And this is where the experience comes in, where I talk to them. Unless we're putting this content out. So what did I do? I carry this. I carry 2 of these, by the way. Sometimes I carry 3.
Bless your heart.
Everything I do in my mind is content. And I stood there and I have a little stand that I carry with me and a microphone that plugs into the side of this. And I just put it on the floor where I'm doing the work and I show them how I'm vacuuming this. And then I just barely do any editing and I post it on YouTube and then I'll post it on TikTok. And we spend about 3.5 hours a day doing this. Every single day. Putting out content every single day because there's no excuse. It's like you don't need a $10,000 camera anymore.
Oh, no.
You can stand at your desk. I mean, you and I have been having an hour plus conversation about really important stuff that people need to hear. And I said, if we can just get off of this, well, what if we say the wrong thing? And what if we tell the wrong thing? And I said, if you know your stuff, you know your stuff. And just tell your story. And I think if you tell your story,
yep.
And you as a professional, just get out there, guys. Hey, this is what we're dealing with. Right there from your desk, not going to a studio. The lighting doesn't have to be perfect. I've done videos just to prove people wrong. That I've done videos with no muff on a microphone in 15-mile-an-hour winds and did a lawn. I did a piece on St. Augustine lawn care, how to mow it right, how to do this in full wind. And I've had 3 people complain, you should have used a wind muff. No kidding. But it still got 150,000 views.
Yeah.
So we got excuse-itis for everything we can't do. When if I got 5 minutes and I can just sit in front of a camera, this set behind me is $25, wow. And you got a desk, which trumps mine, behind you. And you've got all this knowledge. And I said, guys, just start putting it out, figuring out.
And you do, you've got to be authentic to yourself. You've got to. And that's why I tell everybody, I don't mind ruffling feathers. I've come to do that.
Yeah. Oh, I do a ton of it.
But, at the same time, what I'm ruffling over isn't, it's not earth shattering, but it's important.
Yeah. It's highly important. Having this discussion with a lot of people who are just, and there's 3 people that we find in this. IPM can't be done. IPM needs to be redefined so that it can be done correctly, because if not, we can't call it IPM legally. And then nobody wants IPM, and who the heck cares? And that's the 3.
Yeah.
And I say I found the perfect harmony with that. I'm okay with not impressing you. I'm okay with not having everyone agree with me in the industry because I'm consumer centered. Why I called my company Nature Pest is because I found out that people were looking for natural and organic pest control, and there was nobody providing it because nobody wants to say we're natural or organic, where IPM is an extension of organic. But I can't say that because what is my competition going to think? What is my competitors are going to think? I don't care. I care what my customer thinks.
Yeah.
And what we're offering them is a 0 spray solution inside to solve 99. The only time we have to do a surface spray is for fleas. That's it. We can solve silverfish, ants, roach. Every single ant problem we have, we solve with bait. Every single silverfish problem, we reduce the humidity and use borate baits. every single roach problem that we solve with baits. We don't do crack and crevice. We don't even do crack and crevice applications. Only bait. And we solved it. And people say it can't be done. Well, it can't be done where I am. Well, what can you do? Can you just do the German roach part? Because as far as I understand, the only place I think where German roach biology is a little different is in Hawaii, where they actually can live outside.
Well, okay, but in Hawaii, they don't have doors and windows either.
Yeah. But you see what I'm saying? So unless something has radically changed, my protocol can be implemented, and what, Dean
Yeah.
Miller put out, it can be implemented anywhere. We don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, and this is where people are losing it. And I said, what can you implement? Can you seal? Can you do the training on the customers? Stop buying from that store that you're buying, that ethnic store, because this is where we mostly get it, or the restaurant that they're buying from because they're bringing it in the bags, or stop buying the used furniture at garage sales so you don't get bugs in your house. And once we solve that problem in a residential home, they should not have German roaches anymore.
Nope. And it's the same thing with schools. I tell everybody, my biggest thing is, but with schools, I can't fix what comes from the house to the schoolhouse.
Right.
So, but it's education.
And that's much tougher where you're at school, because, what do you do with a kid that nobody wants to say, I have bed bugs?
And I had a situation where a school district, but we've learned, the nurse, the risk manager, the IPM coordinator, they all get together. All right, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? Here's your information. Now, here's the part. Here's what you got to reach out to the family with.
Yeah.
And then go from there. But yeah, Dr. Merchant left us enough information on his City Bugs website that, I can still give them the DIY. Here's the things you need to know.
Right.
Because, you can put stuff in large trash bags and put them outside on a hot, sunny day. Especially down there. Y'all get that sun just as much as we do.
Right. Yeah.
So, I think our bigger problem is it's not my job. I don't care. Just kill it, make it dead, go away.
Yep.
That's an attitude that.
And I think it's not just in pest control. If you look at nutrition.
Oh, it's all of it.
It's all of it. It's just we want a pill. We want an instant. Even now, where we were COVID, we learned that, hey, we can order food and have it delivered for breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
And the instant gratification of everything in society is the problem. Yep. Where we just want. And I said, look, even with contractors that I deal with, I said, guys, that paint is dead. That wood is dead. The concrete is dead. You can mold it. You can do whatever you want. Guess what? There's 3 things that are alive in this house. One of them is the owner, their pets, and their landscape. It's all alive. And the bugs and diseases that are on it are also alive. This is all biological. And you're dealing with all the human emotions, and you're dealing with the human, and everybody forgets we're dealing with humans. We're not dealing with things. So those are the challenges that I'm having. Is when I'm having the conversation, 9 times out of 10, I'm having an emotional conversation. I'm not having a rational one.
Yeah.
And technicians that are geared toward being technical, they're just as guilty as the doctor with the bad bedside manner treating the patient's illness, not treating the patient. And we forget that we are in a people business.
Yes, we are.
We're not in a product business. We're not in a pesticide business.
And sometimes it's the same with a plumber. It's the same with an electrician. Yeah.
They're clammy.
Well, and if I want someone to come into my home, I don't want them glued to their phone. I want them to explain something to me and don't talk down to me.
Right.
That's just simple human behavior.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when I pay you, and it doesn't matter, I'm paying your company, but whoever's coming out to represent said company, that customer's paying you for that knowledge.
Yeah.
And it's okay to sit and explain to somebody 5, 10 minutes, well, this is where this would come from, and this is why we do this.
Right.
So again, so that people understand where you're going. We sometimes tell folks only part of the story when we should probably tell them the whole story so that they get the picture.
Right. Yeah, and people are afraid that if I tell them too much, then they're going to think it's too complicated, or two, they're going to get somebody else, or they're going to try to do it themselves. What I've experienced is the company that calls me, when the customer picks up the phone, they've already done the fogging. They've done the baiting. They've done the tablets. They've done the dust. They've done the boric acid all over the house, the diatomaceous earth. They're at their wits' end already when it's in a rental. When it's a expensive client, he's like, I make $250 an hour as a lawyer, $400 an hour. There's no way I'm doing this.
Yeah.
That's it. So either way, even if I tell people how to do, I use Rutgers protocols. And I send it to my client who says, I can't afford you to do bed bugs. Here is a video from Rutgers on how you actually do it. And the next thing that comes, the call comes back and says, that is so complicated. I don't have the patience to do that. I don't know. My husband doesn't have the patience to do that on how to solve a bed bug problem. That's the reality. We're into this instant gratification. We want it solved, and we want it cheap, and we want it fast, and we want it instant download. It says, you got to sleep on that mattress for 2 weeks while those bed bugs die. I can't guarantee you I got all of them.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to. I say 90% of my job is education. The 10% of solving that bug problem is easy.
Yep.
Once I let the customer, once they understand the data. Like I had a customer just call me yesterday. I do a consult. I guess it's my nature and nurture to be consultative and teach and educate people. Customer calls me yesterday on rodents. It says, somebody left the door open and we got this rat in the house and we can't catch it and we can't kill it. I'm concerned because I've got 2 dogs and a cat. And the first thing that came to my mind is he's got food out for these guys. So I said, are you leaving the food out at night and water for them to drink? And he says, yes. And I said, the first thing for me to catch that rat for you, I need you to stop feeding those animals at night, pick up all the bowls, wash them, and put them away, and put the dog food away where the rats can't reach it. And then I hear okay, let me talk to my wife about, she's not going to want to do that because they want to feed the dogs all the time. I said, dogs don't need to eat at night.
No.
They don't need to drink water at night. It's much more difficult for me to convince his wife that if you want me to catch it, because where am I going to put the trap? And he's got dogs and kids. Where am I going to put rat traps inside that home to catch it where somebody's not going to get their fingers diced off? I got to put it in a box. Am I going to get a rodent to go into that station while that food is just laying there for him to eat and drink?
No, not unless you put it in the station.
So I had to tell the customer, I says, unless you can do this, I can't solve your problem. And it's probably not going to happen in 2 to 3 days because that rat is looking for his food and he's not going to eat something else for a couple of days. It might take me 2 weeks to trap it in there. And if he found a way out or wherever, I mean, it was harder for him to tell his wife she couldn't feed the dogs at night.
Uh-huh.
That's an emotional problem. That is not a biology problem.
Yep.
And that's what we're dealing with. And this is what most people who get into pest control don't understand. And people that are training them don't understand that we live in an age of experience. It's the customer. We're no longer about customer service when it was solving the problem after the fact. We're now into what is the experience with that company from the get-go. Not whether they kill. I said, every time I get a complaint from one of my technicians, it's not because he didn't kill the bug. It's because he left the gate open. It's because he used the hose. We do not get any complaints for bugs. These are all things that had nothing. I said, you see, every time I tell you it had nothing, why are you rushing? Why aren't you taking the time? the customer starts talking to them and then yapping, and he's introverted and he doesn't know how to deal with a customer that follows him all over the house and talks to
Yep.
him. I mean, these are all issues that we're not training for.
And it's
When
got to be part of the training process. No,
yeah,
we talk about that because I say, even when we do our school IPM training, we have a line in the rules that says something about pesticide complaints. And I always say that, make sure that your pest control people understand that if somebody's following them around, they let you, the coordinator, know, because for some reason they're doing that. Now, granted, it could be just simple curiosity because that's my mom,
yep,
or, it's they're looking over your shoulder because they're afraid you're going to do something wrong. But whatever it is, you can engage them. Hey, this is what I'm doing. Because once you start telling them what you're doing, then they kind of like, okay, whatever, gotta go, bye.
yeah. Once I get through my IPM course with that client, he doesn't want to know anymore about
Nope,
bugs.
nope, nope. You're like, yeah, all right, you got it covered. See you later. Gotta go.
Yep, and it's part about having a process every single time that you just repeat every single time with everybody. And some people are, I've got all kinds of people that don't want anything to know about what I'm doing, and I still have to tell them. I put that monitor because I got cleaning ladies who will throw out my monitors.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And they'll throw out my little stations, and they found it on the counter, and what is this? They just throw out my, and the lady of the house and the owner have no clue what the cleaning lady's doing. So I got to communicate with everybody. Like, I've got these monitors under the stove and underneath here. When she cleans, leave it there. Do not throw it out. So it 90% of what we do is communication. The pest stuff is like the super easy stuff.
Yep.
It is. I mean, it's what we do. It's kind of hard, but once you learn it, it's like it's not that hard. When you master the basics, and that's where I focus on, is getting people just to master the basic principles. If you can master the basics,
Yep.
you're going to be okay. Not to get overwhelmed. So it's just we got so much work to do that it does become overwhelming. So the way I figured is I just carry 3 phones with me and record everything I think, and I come across, because
We've got somebody like you out there doing that, because I keep saying we need the next generation to come up after us, and they need to do it bigger and better and louder, because
well, I'm trying to
I don't know.
encourage the next generation, because I am probably closer to your age than you think. I think we're contemporaries, but yeah, I think we should, and one of the things that I've been talking forever. I figure I'm either going to shame you into action or goad you into action. I'm like an electric cattle prod for most people. If you're in Texas, you know what that is.
Yes.
Where I want, but I've been talking about bringing this into the public schools, where we're talking to students about IPM.
Dude, I've wanted that one for a long time, and I'm like, yeah, well, that one's like the Don Quixote.
Yeah. I'm talking about that because the problem is I do training for the county. I teach at the extension service. I deal with the agents. And I'm like, why can't we you got a 4-H program and you work for the same county, and we can't somehow get this into the public school that you work for? I'm trying to scratch my head on that one, but
yeah, I can tell you my backstory, and it has to do all with the education system.
right. Yeah.
I mean, it's just, I come up with these ideas, and then I'm like, well, yeah,
Right.
3 more of me.
Yeah.
And a lot of volunteers, maybe we could get something, but I'm thoroughly convinced if recycling is where it got started, and water conservation got started when we were kids in school, Where do you think this all needs to start?
Yeah. Where are kids hanging out today, by the way?
Probably in front of their computer screens.
Yep. That's where we need to be.
Yeah.
When kids are on TikTok, people are like, "You're going to create videos for kids?" I said, "Yeah, because they're going to tell their parents and they're going to tell their grandparents."
Yep.
If you really want to influence, you got to be where they are, and you got to get over that's for kids, because now you can learn anything on anything.
Oh, well, yeah.
So if I want to influence, I got to be where people are. Are they on Twitter? I'm going to be on Twitter. If they're on LinkedIn, I'll be on LinkedIn. If they're on Facebook, if they're on YouTube, I don't care. You got to get past yourself, I guess. And then
Well, yeah. And I mean,
that's it. I mean, that's why I'm talking about all this, because I said, if I can influence a couple hundred people, I don't need 1,000.
I just say one. I'm
Yeah.
always happy if I can get one to convert.
Yep. And not only that, but if we can influence somebody, 100 people that can influence.
Yep.
We got plenty of brains. I mean, I've seen every 3 of the videos that Bobby Corrigan has out publicly. I like to see 500 of them out. I like to see Denny Miller stuff out. I'm trying to get her on the show, so if you talk to her, I already reached out to her. She told me she would. I just think I need to prod her a little bit more.
Yeah, you got to just gig her on Facebook.
Yep. She follows me. She knows what I think. I love the stuff she puts out. I mean, I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of all the university people, because they've done the research. They've done the work. The problem is nobody's reading it. And I think, to me, like, it's sitting in a library nobody's going to read. And that's why I like to see it out there.
And that's where we struggle, is getting those messages out. I tell everybody, even when I'm talking to new professionals in extension, yeah, you've got this document, and what extension is supposed to do is translate from the teaching and the research and get it outreach, but the message may be the same, but you carve it differently for a different audience.
Yeah. And we got to get used to the new media, that everything is audio visual. It's nobody's reading. I get people who are having a fit that nobody's reading their books. And I said, whose fault is that? I said, you're blaming people for not, it's the buggy whip guy complaining that nobody wants to buy buggy whips anymore. I said, why don't you just take it and take your videos and illustrate them in a way that's visual and audio? That's why I listen. That's why I have 250 audiobooks, because I don't read. I listen. Now, I read technical material. I'm funny because I can't read entertainment material. It bores me to death to read a book. A business book, I like going to conferences and lectures, so I will listen. I'm audible, but I'm also visual. When it comes to the technical stuff, I can devour 200-page PhD dissertations like nothing, because I like going to technical material. So for a guy like me, you're going to have to give it to me all 3 ways if you really want to engage me.
Yep.
Because that's how I'm engaged. And we need to learn to engage people where they're at. And I think that is probably the next conversation. But education understands this, and yet they don't do it. Because we know how kids learn. Some are kinesthetics and some are visual, and some are, and we understand how
Well,
kids
then
learn.
what happens is then you get, like in my situation, you get bogged down with an agency that's going in multiple directions, and then you can't always get into the lane that you need to be.
Yep. And I get it. It's tough. I mean, I know. I mean, I can't do any more hours. I can't put any more time. I can't do this. And I said, okay, let's figure out a way that we can get together and do it. That's why I'm doing the channel. That's why I keep doing this after 6 years. Like, people, why do you do this podcast? It drives me.
Well, listening, you keep doing it.
Yeah, and you have to stick to it, and it isn't going to happen. I got guys that quit after 3, after a dozen podcasts. I said, guys, you want to cause a movement, you're going to have to do it for the next 10 to 15 years.
Yeah,
and be at it to cause a movement. I think the movement is happening in the marketplace. where people are not wanting the pesticides. They're more educated. They're not wanting it. The manufacturers don't want to hear that because we have to sell less. This is why there's a lot of reconciliation in the industry. I get it. But the reality is people want natural, people want organic, people want less.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to figure out how we're going to give it to them. You know, that's where the challenge is, because nobody wants to work themselves out of work. You know, this is why we've got all of a sudden the sale of Bayer happening, of their pest control division. Why Syngenta sold. Why all of the pest control companies are merging.
Yeah.
It's a whole shift is happening in the industry. A lot of people just don't want the change because they're the baseboard jockey and they don't want to hear it.
Well, and change is always,
It's painful.
doesn't matter what it is. Change can be scary for a lot of people.
Yeah.
The truth and reality is change happens no matter what. You cannot live through life without changing.
Yep.
And the more you fight it, the harder it is. So it's easier just to give over and then figure out, how do I move forward?
Right.
And with the pest control stuff, there's lots of ways to move forward and not have to spray something that could potentially harm a human, yourself,
Right.
the environment, or a non-target.
Right. Yeah, and most people really care about, when I started with this passion for protecting pollinators and protecting, and then I realized none of my customers cared about that. What my customer cared about is, number one, is it going to affect Fifi? I literally get asked. I had a guy yesterday ask me, well, the reason I ask about how the pesticides you're using are safe is because I have a dog. And then I hear this little baby in the background. He didn't ask me about the baby. He asked me about the dog. And I've said this at conferences, more people are more concerned about their pets than they're concerned about their children. It's the weirdest thing in the world that, the little baby's running around the floor where the pesticide's going to be, but you're more concerned about the dog. And I found out that that's where I needed to target, because people didn't care about the pollen. If I can do it for the same price, and be a benefit to protect the pollinators, that's wonderful. I just couldn't sell it, my idea of let's protect pollinators and let's protect the environment and let's protect the soil and the water, because people are caring about what's in their home.
Yep. Let me protect your home, your family, and your pets.
Yep. That's it. And that's what we had to focus on and be realistic. But it's kind of like, the way I look at it is, when my child is little, I got to figure out how to get those veggies in there.
Yep.
I got to get the veggies in there. I got to be smart enough to know how to get it in. I don't care how the veggies get in. They got to get in somewhere.
There's more than one way to skin a cat.
Yep. I don't understand that, because I don't know why anybody would skin a cat, but
I've wondered about that as well. But guess what? There's always, it reminds me of that game you play when you're little. We're going on a lion hunt, can't get through it, got to go under it, got to go around it.
Yeah.
There's always a way. Right. Where there's a will, there's a way, and you can do it. You just cannot let can't get in your way.
Yeah.
Throw that word out.
Yeah.
And then understand that pest management really is more about being a good pest detective.
Yep.
And you sell those services.
Yep. No, I am totally sold on that concept. My consciousness as a business owner, of having a conscience of what is the right thing to do, and then realizing that the challenge of doing it is high, the cost is high. I had to come to terms with who my client is, and realize that not everyone wants what I'm selling. When you're wanting a cheap spray service, I can't help you, because I can't reduce my technician to that. This is not what we do. It's actually against our policy. I will fire my technician for spraying the inside of a house, literally, because that's against our policy. Is we make a brand promise to the client that we're going to protect that indoor air quality, the surfaces, do everything that we can not to contaminate the inside of that home, or at least if we're going to do it with a bait, it's still going to be there, but it's a whole lot less than having a liquid application.
Mm-hmm.
and that is the promise we make. That is what they're trusting us with. They're trusting us with their health. And some people will say, well, there's nothing wrong with it because all these products are safe if applied according to label directions. The problem is I can't find that anywhere on the EPA website.
Okay, so and this is an interesting debate. And so because EPA registers a product and they approve the label, the safety data sheet is by another agency, Occupational Safety and Hazard Association, OSHA. You really want to know what's in your product? You get the manufacturing safety data sheet that goes with whatever, and you go look at section 11. It's called the toxicology section. That tells you exactly. And it also tells you in a safety data sheet, which you can't find on a label, what are the inert ingredients.
Right.
Well, if the inert ingredients are a petroleum distillate, some petroleum product, we learned a long time ago that petroleum is carcinogenic. So yes, the active ingredient may not be.
Right.
But if you put it together with this and mix it and make it thus, yes. But this is where, again, oh, well, that was just those organophosphates. Well, what were pyrethroids? Yes, they are the synthetic version of the pyrethrins, but they're also a man-made product. And then when you go and you look at the toxicology of it, the bifenthrin being one of them, you start looking at some numbers and you're like, huh. Now, I spray this product on the exterior perimeter. I roll my sleeves up. I don't wear gloves. And I do that at least 5 times a day, 5 days a week. But I don't share that information with anybody. And my employer doesn't really hammer home the fact about a safety data sheet.
I just had that conversation online, and I when I put stuff out there, I'm usually pretty intentional about and I had the whole debate, and I'll let you go back to your thought on that, because everybody tells me that the safety data sheet is only for when there's an accident, for a spill, that you don't need it. And then I'm going to go even further than that, but I'm going to go ahead and let you finish your thought on that. Go ahead.
Well, because you just brought up, again, a common misperception.
Yep.
The time to read the safety data sheet is not when you have spilt it on your body and you're supposed to be going, well, now what do I do with all this?
Right.
No, it is no different, but I can tell you again, we don't do it. I buy a product off the shelf. I go and I buy brand X Tylenol. Do I read the label? No, it's just Tylenol. I know what Tylenol does.
I just need to know how many I need to take.
You know, it doesn't matter. I can do this. And yet, I'm a pest management professional, and this is where I get frustrated. Most of the products are considered general use. They're a general use household product. Therefore, I don't have to do extra training. Or therefore, under worker protection in the ag world, the only products I really need to train over are restricted use stuff. Bull hockey. I call everybody's bluff. No. Since the 80s, we have had this Right to Know Act and Hazard Communication Act, and it has been around since I remember having to learn about liquid paper.
Right.
I remember the original trainings on that and the horrible videos we used to watch. But everything, including hand sanitizer, disinfecting wipes, all of those registered pesticides come with a safety data sheet. And you should know both documents. And if you're training your employees in pest management, by golly, by jeebers, they need to know a label and a safety data sheet.
And here's my argument. I said, when I read a label, it says it is a violation of federal law to use this product inconsistent with its labeling. It does not say label.
Yes, labeling, and labeling is different than a label.
But it says, the law says that I have to use it consistent with the labeling, not with the label. And most people say, well, no, that's the label. And when you look at the EPA website, that's not so.
Yep.
As a professional, you're supposed to read both.
Yep.
In order to comply, says, well, there's no compliance for an application on the SDS. And I say, well, I've proven many SDSs that actually require you to wear a NIOSH respirator when the label doesn't.
You know, and COVID really kind of brought it up. Safety first. Prior to COVID, me talking to folks about a face mask, blah, 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 blah. People are now associating, wait a second, because I tell everybody, if you can smell it, FYI, you're breathing it in. So if you're spraying something, I don't care what it is, it can aerosolize, and you don't know your body. We know a lot of things, but we still do not have a litmus test that I can go spit in a cup, you dip something in and it comes out, and you stick it in something else and it says, oh, well, these are all the things you're going to have a problem with within your life.
Right.
We don't have that. Therefore, what we have learned, because asbestos, I always use asbestos a lot in my trainings. When my grandparents were growing up and when they were building houses back then, and this went up until almost the 50s and 60s, you could touch asbestos and you could be dressed like we are, short sleeve shirt, you know, pants, shoes with some socks. Right. You go touch some asbestos now, and if you don't look like the Michelin Man, you know, you can't go anywhere near it, because what did we learn? Oh, even though we couldn't really smell it and we really couldn't see it, those asbestos fibers do transmit enough to where they go in and get deposited in our lungs. And oh yeah, some people get mesothelioma.
Yeah.
Not everybody.
Right.
But I mean, who's going to take the crap roll of the dice of their lives and go, well, I'm not going to wear that personal protective equipment because I'm 10 foot tall and bulletproof.
Yeah, and the whole idea, we went from things that smelled to things that didn't smell, and therefore they're safer because they don't smell. And the false impression of what the customer doesn't see and doesn't know, doesn't understand, and even what the technician doesn't see, doesn't know, and doesn't understand. Because I can see the need for SDS training where it's mandatory, where I still will have this argument where people says, "Have you read the SDS?" Well, no. Because I only need to carry it in case I have a spill. If I post that on Facebook, I will get 50% of the technicians in the country to say that to me. And I will say, well, that's why I did a video and I said, I proved to them by the EPA website that by law they need to read and understand the SDS. And people will because you have a solo operator that feels he doesn't have to because he doesn't have employees. So that's fine if you want to take that risk.
Ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
Until somebody takes you to court.
Yeah.
And then, or you harm yourself and you don't follow the instructions. Not every court's going to side with you because there is rules. Directions say, I go through directions. We do pesticide safety as part of our school IPM training. Of course, I work with a pesticide safety education coordinator by the name of Dr. Don Ranchi, who will scare anybody to death because he's like, this isn't a joke. This isn't a game. You are playing with chemicals. Yeah. Think about yourself first. Yeah. And because he is a gentleman, he can go into some things, but he does make everybody look, people, what are these? Hands. Put your hands in front of you. Look at them. Say to yourself, these are the nastiest things on my body. You know, you're doing things with this and you touch, and we've learned what now we don't shake hands anymore, right?
Right. Yeah. I'm glad that PPE became a household name.
Yeah, so am I. I mean, in germs, I'm real happy about that because I've enjoyed not having cold and flu.
Yeah.
But at the same time, our industry needs to understand plumbers, electricians, railroad operators, you name it. If medical professionals, they all get extra training, and it's so that we can be better at what we do.
Right.
And if you don't strive to be the best that you can be, why? Why not?
Right.
Because you can.
Yeah.
And
No,
every day I give it my best. It's just some days are better than others.
yeah, I know. No, I mean, one of the things that burns me up as a professional, I've been in this now 14 years, and I've taken just about any class that's been available to me, paid um, to take, online, in person, it doesn't matter. I've never been in a CEU where they taught core, where they taught the label, and they taught the SDS. And all of them have been taught by a manufacturer's rep who glossed over and says, well, you just need to have it here. You need to carry it with you. But nobody's ever gotten into we go into the label and we get into what the 10 parts of the label that we have to know. And that's been taught to death. And then we talk about where this is how you would apply this product in this situation. This is where I've had the beef, where industry training, where people are having this argument about the SDS when we have all the information available, because it's glossed over and it's made to be sound like it's not important at all, really.
So if I told you I was doing a webinar on April the 8th on that specific topic, why it's important to understand pesticide labels and safety data sheets, you're telling me I'm going down the right road?
I think you are. I think we're going to poke a lot of bears.
Well, that's what I'm being asked by the National Pesticide Safety Education Center to help them do this because, and this really started the bear poking. I mean, beforehand, yeah, but with COVID, not only am I poking a bear, I'm stirring the pot because, again, kiddos shouldn't be using wipes to wipe down deaths. What part of keep out of reach of children
Right. Didn't
don't
anybody
you
ever...
understand? I mean, we've got products out there that I know last year when we were doing this and schools were reopening, watching a lot of my school folks looking at, yeah, they looked at the label and then they went and opened the safety data sheet and they were like, oh.
It will give you nightmares.
I mean, and that's when, the conversation, and me just kept bringing it up because we do have this national school IPM work group that I belong to. And this was one of those topics. And sometimes when you scream the loudest, they just come back at you and say, fine, guess what you're going to get to cover? All right, I'll take on labels and
right.
I know it's not sexy, but I cover this because it's important.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I am even looking at what we do, because we've stuck with, like I said, I don't like the whole spraying thing. And even with products that we're using that are 25B products, that are exempt, that don't have that quote on the label that says it's a violation of federal law to use this product. Then you look at the SDS and you're like, this is why I've always refused to apply 25B products indoors.
Well, yeah. I mean, there are two pieces of paper, so to speak, gives you two different things of information, but it's you who make the informed decision using that judicious part of that pesticide to figure out what is it. I mean, if you look at boric acid, yeah, it could be pretty scary, but I'm not going to aerial dust it.
Right.
I'm going to put it either
like most customers do.
you
when
know,
they toss it all over their kitchen,
kitchen, but
or diatomaceous earth because it's organic and they can dust it all over their house. I literally had one guy do that. He dusted his entire carpet and then decided he's going to vacuum it and forgot that there was no bag in the vacuum.
Oh.
And I walk into that and it looked like nobody had dusted the house cleaning for like 6 years as you realize you're breathing all this in. And he says, yeah, I know. I says, you need to hire a company to come in and clean this. I put on a respirator when I went in there to do a flea job because he had put DEO.
He had exceeded the limit, the label limit.
Not only that, but then when he turned on the vacuum cleaner, he created a dust bowl inside the house that circulated it everywhere. So, and then when we start talking about how pesticides attach themselves to dust, pyrethroids attach themselves to dust, and people have sealed homes and all of this stuff. I mean, I got footage of stuff that I've seen that would make most people cringe. And here being in Miami, the whole Hispanic culture of going, because you still, you're probably familiar with it because of you're in Texas, where you go into a home and you use a thermal fogger in a home and it's perfectly okay. In Central and South America, most people would cringe at seeing that, but this is a normal occurrence for them in undeveloped countries to just fog everything. And what's the problem? And on top of that, you're using petroleum distillates when you're using thermal foggers. And we could just, so when I'm talking to my clients who are, we're 65% Hispanic down here, they're not getting this. It's not registering why we don't do this, I need you to come and fumigate, why we don't spray, why we protect the indoor air quality, why we don't want their kids' paws all over this or their dog's paws. But they don't read what I read. And then people say, well, that's just put out by a university because they've got an agenda. I get it. That's just the general distrust of everything, where nobody trusts the government, nobody trusts the educators, nobody trusts the company. And we got such an issue of distrust because there is no real transparency, because it's not convenient most of the time to be transparent.
No, we need influencers.
Yep. And I think this is where this is vital, that I just need 100 of you to come on and talk about this, the real science behind what we do, and how we get it done. And it can be done. It can be done as safely as possible. It can be done totally different than our grandparents understood it.
Most definitely.
And we don't have to keep going down that road. You can making minor changes. And I'm glad that people are listening to me. Technicians are saying, yeah, my company told me to go fog a car with this product. And then I read the label and I said, thank God I didn't do it, because I would have violated the law. That's the sad part, is you got the owners and managers telling you, who know less about pest control than you do. So these are the things we got to work on, Janet. We got so much to talk about and so little time. But no, I really do appreciate you being on and sharing and having this conversation. What do you want to leave the people with that they should know, and we can close it there?
That you can achieve success. No, it doesn't happen overnight. So the old saying is, Rome wasn't conquered in a day. Neither will pest control.
Right.
Be patient, be thorough, be positive.
Thank you.
And have a good day.
And have a pestacular day.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being on. If people want to get a hold of you, how can they reach you or know more about you?
Like I said, I'm very easy to find on Google, but you can reach me out at, let's see, my easiest one probably, Janet Hurley on Twitter. I'm Janet D. Hurley on Twitter. The work address is ja-hurley@tamu.edu. That's the email. And like I said, you can find me everywhere. IPM Experience House, School IPM in Texas. Just Google Janet Hurley, Texas. And I'm told by my own family, I pop up.
Great deal. It's been great having you on. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care, Frank.
All right, ma'am. Have a great day.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.